Good day. Welcome. The YAMCA education series is free and open to the public, so we encourage you to spread the word and invite your friends and family to participate. We host approximately 6 to 8 of these a month on all types of different topics. This program will last about an hour. If you have any questions, we ask you to save them to the end. You can always put them into the chat box and I can view them as well. With that being said, thank you again for joining us. I'd like to introduce you to Matt Margolis, our favorite elder law attorney here. Today, Matt will be breaking down Medicaid eligibility for an individual moving into a long-term care facility and what to be mindful of during and before the application process. Welcome, Matt. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, how are you? How's everybody doing? Good morning. All right, I just wanted to make sure I was unmuted.
You are.
So thanks, Pam. So sorry, I'm just taking a note here or something I don't want to forget because I forget everything. So good to see everybody. As Pam mentioned, my name is Matt Margolis, and the talk today is all about the ins and outs of Medicaid. Just to give you, a short little snippet on me and our firm. So my partner Lauren Weldon and I have had our practice in Park Ridge now for a little over 7 years. All we do is estate planning and elder law. We don't practice outside of that box whatsoever. We don't dabble in any other areas of the law. And so we help people with wills, trusts, powers of attorney. We do some special needs work. And then on the elder law side, we have a very strong focus on Medicaid and asset protection, which is what we're going to focus today's talk on. So I think that's it. I think that's all I have for a background. So my 2 cents, and just sort of my presentation style, very conversational. You're not gonna see any slides. That's just not how I conduct my talks. I'd rather you just kind of focus on what's being said and not anything on a screen. If you do have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I am going to have the chat box open on my side. So putting questions into the chat box would be probably the best way to do it. Because the way that my screen is structured, I can't see everybody. And also many of you are not even showing your screens, which is totally fine. So if you do have a question, I'd ask that you put it in the chat box. And that also allows me to kind of finish my train of thought, and then I can obviously get to your question. The one caveat on that is that I would really like your questions to be be broad. I'm just gonna be very blunt. I'm not going to answer any personal questions. So if you ask me a question that's like, my mom, my dad, something like that, I'm not going. I'll probably reference it because I don't want to seem rude, but I'm just giving you a heads up that those are not questions I'll answer today, guys. That you guys are free to reach out to me after the talk, whether it's via email or via phone. Email is always preferred, and I'm always happy to answer questions offline, if you will. And then I think maybe Pam mentioned this already, but if you keep yourselves on mute just to kind of prevent any background noise, that's always helpful, just so we can make sure that everybody can get the information and not hear crying babies or barking dogs or whatever it might be in the background at your house. So. Here it tends to be screaming kids. All right, ins and outs of Medicaid. So, Medicaid's changed quite a bit. It's even changed, Medicaid's changed quite a bit in the last 30 years. So 20 years before I started even doing this, I've been in this area of the law now since the beginning of 2011. And there's been plenty of changes even before I got involved. And that's because they're used to, and I'll make more sense of some of these things, but there used to be a shorter look back period, which we'll discuss. The state used to not require as much from applicants. They used to not ask for as much documentation, and they used to not investigate as much into people's applications as they do now. Right now, everything is really looked at with a fine-tooth comb from the state. I think for good reason, the state does do that. They're doing their due diligence, right? They've got certain rules in place and I understand that they want to follow them. That just makes it harder for us. And forget when I say us, but that just makes it harder for the general public when they're applying for Medicaid. Because the state basically, to some extent, expects that people are, reviewing the Medicaid policy prior to ever being close to a situation where they're applying for Medicaid. All right, and so let's talk about how Medicaid works so that I can make sense of some of these kind of esoteric things that I'm saying that have no context for you. So when we look at Medicaid in Illinois, first of all, the type of Medicaid we're going to talk about today is what we call nursing home Medicaid. It's long-term care Medicaid, if you will. It's the kind of Medicaid that we're only going to be applying for if we're moving into a nursing home or a supportive living facility. These are the two types of living situations in Illinois where we can have Medicaid pay for our monthly care. Okay, Medicaid does not pay for 95% of places that are considered memory care are not going to accept Medicaid. Any place that's called assisted living will not accept Medicaid. Any place that's called independent living will not accept Medicaid. Every single place out there that is referred to as a supportive living facility, they will take Medicaid, okay? Every single supportive living facility in Illinois will take Medicaid. When it comes to nursing homes, not every single nursing home takes Medicaid, but there are plenty out there that do, okay? And where we're located here, sort of on the greater North Shore, I would argue at least 50% of the nursing homes around here accept Medicaid, okay? So when we look at Medicaid, there's rules, right? And it's not that everybody can just apply for Medicaid and get approved. And so when we're applying for Medicaid, we need to fit into a certain box. We need to meet certain qualifications or fit within certain parameters. If I'm a single individual applying for Medicaid, okay, in a nursing home, I'm allowed to have no more than $2,000 in my name. Okay. I can own a house, but I've got to put it up for sale. Okay. And when I get those sale proceeds, I'm gonna have to spend down all that money, and we'll talk about what that means. But basically, as a single person, I get to keep $2,000 in my name. I get to keep, if I'm in a skilled nursing facility, I get to keep a whopping $30 a month of my income, right? So whatever I get from Social Security or a pension or a combination of the two, I get to keep $30 a month. And then there's this 5-year look back period, which I'll talk about in a second. If I'm in a supportive living facility, the only difference is that rather than getting to keep $30 a month of my income, I get to keep $90 a month of my income. Okay. So skilled nursing facility on Medicaid, I get $30 a month of my income. Supportive living, I get to keep $90 of my income. If I'm married, my spouse, who we call the spouse the community spouse, okay? It's whoever's living at home in the community. My spouse can have up to $109,560 in his or her name, okay? $109,560. They can own a house. And by the way, the house actually has to be transferred to my spouse's name individually. My name cannot be on the title to the house anymore. My name can also not be, if I'm the one going in the nursing home, my name can also not be on all the bank accounts that my spouse is allowed to keep that total $109,560. Okay. So my spouse gets the house, $109,560. And then as far as income is concerned, my spouse gets to keep $2,739 a month of income, $2,739. These are all pretty random numbers, I know, right? None of them make sense. In most situations, when somebody's applying for Medicaid, typically we're a little bit more advanced, and we're talking about somebody that's going to be a little bit more advanced in age, at least Medicaid in a nursing home. They're going to be a little bit more advanced in age. And so in most of these cases, neither spouse is typically working. Typically, most of the time, both spouses are retired. They're just simply not working. And so their income typically is limited to Social Security, maybe, and it could be a pension or 2 or 3. So my spouse can have up to $2,739 a month of income. If my spouse's income is less than that, Okay, let's say that I'm applying for Medicaid and my wife's income from Social Security is $1,500. Okay, let's say the income is $1,500. I can actually transfer my income above the $30 that I get to keep. I can transfer some of my, what we will call excess income, that if I was single would have gone to the nursing home. I can transfer that excess income and give it to my wife to get her up to that $2,739 a month number. Okay, so I can fill that gap and allow her to have more income on a monthly basis. Okay, if her income is more than that, if her income is already more than the 2,739, then I can't transfer any income to her. Okay, I'm going to say there's a little caveat there as far as a way to actually increase the 2,739 for her, but for purposes of our conversation, and the fact that it's a very hard process to go through, I'm not going to really go down that path. So there is an option, but I'll tell you this: I've been doing this for 11 years, and between my partner and I, I've been doing it for 22 years, and that's never come up. Okay, that situation's never come up, and we work on plenty of Medicaid applications. Okay, let's talk about this look back period. Well, actually, I want to talk about the house really quick because people always ask this question. Does the house have to have a certain value? We understand that if there's a spouse living in the house, it's a protected asset. There's no value limitation on the house. The house can be worth $200,000. It can be worth $1.2 million. I mean, there's a reality that most people that are applying for Medicaid, they're probably not going to have a $1.2 million home. But listen, you've got people that moved to areas like Wilmette and Glencoe. Years ago, they bought a house for $10,000, and now it's worth $900,000. But from an asset standpoint, they are living month to month on their income. So yes, there are some cases where that will happen, but few and far between. So the look back period. What Medicaid does is when we go to apply for Medicaid, Medicaid wants to see what did we do with our assets over the last 5 years. Okay, Medicaid's looking to see, did we give any money away, right? That's really what they're looking for. They don't really care what we spent our money on as long as we spent it on ourselves. Okay, so Medicaid's fine if my wife and I spent $50,000 to redo our kitchen 3 years ago, or $20,000 to replace our roof a year ago. They're fine if we spent $15,000 on a European vacation within the last 5 years. They're okay that we bought a brand new, TV for $1,500. These things are fine as long as they're for us. Medicaid is not okay when we use our money for somebody else, in a way where I'm going to use the phrase where it's a transfer for less than fair market value. So Medicaid has this terminology, this phrase. We do not allow transfers for less than fair market value. What that means is I can't just gift money and then apply for Medicaid and expect to get approved without any issues. And because the look back period is 5 years, Medicaid's going to be they're going to ask for 5 years of documentation. They're going to want 5 years of bank statements for every single account that my wife and I have. Checking, savings, money market, IRAs, 401ks. They're going to want to see life insurance policy statements, etc. They want to see what we did with our money. And again, they're really looking to see, did we give any away? Did we make any transfers for less than fair market value? Now, gifting money is an easy thing to figure out, right? If I wrote a check to my son for $20,000 and he didn't do $20,000 of work to my house, or he didn't provide $20,000 worth of services, Medicaid's going to consider that a gift or a transfer for less than fair market value. Similarly, if my wife and I paid for dance lessons for our daughter or guitar lessons for our son, for our daughter or son, or for our granddaughter or grandson, probably more likely in these situations, that's going to be looked at as a gift as well. Similarly, if my wife and I sold our car to our son and the car was valued at $15,000, but we sold it for $1,000, Medicaid would say there was a $14,000 transfer for less than fair market value. right? The car was worth 15, we sold it for $1,000. So in Medicaid's eyes, we gave away $14,000. All right, well, what does all this mean, right? What does it mean when we make these transfers for less than fair market value? Well, Medicaid penalizes us. Okay, and the way that Medicaid penalizes us is they take the value of the gift, okay, and this is more particular to skilled nursing facilities. It works a little bit different for supportive living, which I'll talk about in a second. But for skilled nursing, the way this works is Medicaid takes the amount of transfers for less than fair market value that we've made over the last 5 years. Okay, again, Medicaid's only concerned with the last 5 years. If we gave money away 5 years and 2 days ago before we filed the Medicaid application, that doesn't matter. Okay, so let's just say in the last 5 years, between my wife and I, we gave away $50,000. And the nursing home that I'm moving into costs $10,000 a month. And let's just say that on June 1st, you know, I'm down to $2,000 in my name. My wife is down to the $109,560 that she's allowed. She's got a house. I think I forgot to mention she's allowed to have a car as well. The $109,560, a house and a car. And so we're at a point where we could apply, right? I can apply for Medicaid. And Medicaid says, Matt, you're approved. However, we are going to give you a 5-month penalty. And the reason why it would be a 5-month penalty is that because my wife and I gave away $50,000 over the last 5 years, we take that number and we divide it by the monthly cost of care at this specific nursing home, which is $10,000 a month. And so Medicaid says, Matt, if you didn't give that money away, if you didn't give away that $50,000, you wouldn't have had to apply for Medicaid for another 5 months. And so that's what we're going to penalize you. You've got to figure out a way to pay for the next 5 months. We don't care how you do it, but we are not going to pay for you. Okay, so you are approved, but Medicaid is going to start paying for you in October. You got to figure out a way to pay for the next 5 months. That's how a penalty works for a nursing home. For a skilled nurse, for a supportive living facility, the way that it's going to work is there's basically a set number that Medicaid uses as a monthly divisor, if you will. I always forget it. I want to say, let's just say it's about $5,700. And so whatever amount of money that we gifted or that were considered to be transfers for less than fair market value, you would take that total and divide it by this monthly divisor that the state has provided, and that would provide us with the penalty that we would face in a supportive living facility. So one thing I realized maybe that I forgot to touch on earlier is the difference between a supportive living facility and a skilled nursing home or a skilled nursing facility. Skilled nursing facility is really going to be your top level of care. Okay, this is going to be, you know, somebody that needs help with more than a few activities of daily living. You know, somebody that needs help with a few of these, you know, a few things such as, you know, getting dressed, walking around. They can't walk on their own. They can't feed themselves. They can't shower or go to the bathroom on their own. They can't handle their own medication. I mean, these are all considered activities of daily living. And somebody that needs help with more than a few of those is probably going to be more of a candidate for skilled nursing. Whereas supportive living is going to be more similar to assisted living. Okay, so if you're somewhat familiar with assisted living, that's sort of like that level of care where, you know, you need some help, but you're still able to manage some things on your own, right? You might need somebody helping you with your medication and maybe somebody helping you get up and out of bed in the morning, but you're able to go to the bathroom on your own. You can take a shower on your own, etc. So you need some help with a few activities of daily living, but you're still able to manage quite a bit on your own. So that's going to be more supportive living. Okay, more supportive living is going to be kind of like that first level of care, if you will, right? You're just not, you can't be on your own and you need some help. Okay. So I see a question in the chat box. What if the current house of the applicant is in a trust? So this will sort of depend on the type of trust that we're talking about. Without going into too much detail, if if somebody has a revocable living trust, which is going to be the most common type of trust out there, it's the type of trust that, that 95% of people that say they have a trust, they probably have a revocable living trust. If this is the case, Medicaid will require that the house come out of the trust. They're going to want the house in the name individually of the spouse that's living at home, that's not going into the nursing home, and that's not applying for Medicaid. So 99 out of 100 times, we're going to have to take the house out of the trust and put it in that spouse's name individually. And then once the application gets approved, then we can start talking about putting it back in a trust. But again, it can't be, once it goes back into any kind of trust, after the application is approved, that trust can have zero benefit. It cannot be a trust that has any benefit for the nursing home spouse. Okay, so in a lot of cases, if this was, this is a trust that was put in place, years prior, typically most couples, whether they have a joint trust for both of them or they each have separate trusts, if they have a joint trust, it's for the benefit of both of them. We won't be able to use that trust again for purposes of the Medicaid, once Medicaid is applied for. We might have to create a new trust. Similarly, in most cases where we have clients that might create separate trusts, right? So a trust for one spouse and a trust for the other, even though my trust is in my name only, the reality is that the beneficiary of my trust would be my spouse. Most of us that are married, if we have separate, even though if we have separate trusts, our spouse would be our primary beneficiary. And so we're gonna have to take the house out of that trust, and we're probably gonna have to update and redo our planning, okay? That's just the case. In most cases where Medicaid comes in, there's going to be an adjustment of our planning that we have to do, or that has to be considered. Maybe not in every single case, but in the vast majority of them, we're going to sort of have to pivot and update or reduce some of our planning, because now we're in a different phase, right? We're not in a phase where we didn't plan for this, 20 years ago when we put our trust in place, or 40 years ago when we put our trust in place. Okay. So I hope that answers the question that was in the chat box adequately. I feel like there's this term, this phrase "spend down" gets thrown around quite a bit. Well, hold on, before I do that, I want to talk about this penalty for a few more minutes. So when we look at this penalty, one of the things that people have to consider is, how to deal with the penalty. This look back period, guys, becomes a big issue because a lot of people, there are some people that have an idea that Medicaid might be on the horizon, right? Their spouse has not been doing well for more than a few years, and maybe they've had caregivers at home, and so they know it hasn't been unlikely over the last couple of years that their spouse might have to go into a nursing home, right? So there's some cases where we definitely know that it's a possibility that we'll be looking at nursing home care. If that's the case, I highly advise that you discuss things with an elder law attorney, whether it's me or somebody else. It's just better to have a plan in place. It's better to it's good to make sure that you're doing things the right way, so that you're not kind of guessing and moving money around and changing accounts and moving real estate around and doing it in a way that ultimately might make things even worse when you're applying for Medicaid. I can tell you, people come to us all the time and they're like, "Oh, we took the house out of mom's name and we put it in all three of our names, right? The three kids. And we took mom's bank accounts and we put all of our names on them, or we took mom's name off the Morgan Stanley account, we put it in our name." It's like, guys, slow down for a second. You shouldn't have done any of this. Okay. I'm not going to go into it today. There's another talk I give where I go into this. There are ways to plan proactively when we believe we've got more than 5 years on our side before we feel like our loved one is going to go into a nursing home or supportive living facility and potentially apply for Medicaid. So there's definitely proactive planning we can do from a pre-5-year standpoint. There's also planning, not in every case, but there's also situations where people weren't proactive. They're basically on the doorsteps of having to move into a nursing home, and they want to protect some of their assets, and they don't want to just spend down, which we'll talk about, all their money before they apply for Medicaid. And so these are situations where, elder law attorneys such as ourselves can help. Okay, so even though we don't have 5 years on our side, there's still plenty of situations where we can help people protect up 50 to 60% of their assets at the last minute. Okay, so just keep this in mind, all right? Because people are always surprised to know that is an option, or it's a possibility. Again, depending on some circumstances, but again, we or other elder law attorneys do that type of work and do that type of planning all the time. Back to the spend down. So the spend down, this is what we refer to when somebody moves into a nursing home and they apply for Medicaid, or just before they apply for Medicaid and they have too much money, right? Because we talked about how much money you can have when applying for Medicaid, right? If I'm the one going in the nursing home, I can have no more than $2,000 in my name, and my wife or my spouse can have no more than $109,560 in her name, plus a house, plus a car. So what if we have $300,000? Well, if we have $300,000 and we don't do anything at all, right? We don't reach out to an elder law attorney. We're not interested for whatever reason in trying to see if there's a way to protect some of this so that the spouse at home can have more money at his or her disposal for the rest of their life. Then the spend down is really just us, between my wife and I, between me paying for all my needs in the nursing home and other needs I have, and my wife just paying for her regular, monthly bills and whatever comes up. The spend down is us basically spending down our money until we're at a point where I'm Medicaid eligible, right? Which is me being down to $2,000 and my wife being down to $109,560. Again, these are situations where I really advise people, even if there's no asset protection we can do for somebody before they apply for Medicaid, because they never did any pre-planning, and maybe because of their circumstances, we can't do any planning at the last minute. There's still ways to sort of protect assets during a spend down period, right? So there's some clients that come to us and let's say they've got like $50,000 more than what Medicaid allows them to have, or $100,000 more, and maybe we can't do any real asset protection work. Well, these are situations where we advise clients, hey, you should be prepaying your final expenses. Okay, these are things that we can spend money on prior to a Medicaid application and that don't count against you. They're not considered transfers for less than fair market value. So, some people are uncomfortable with it, but those expenses are going to come up when we all pass away, right? Whether we want to be buried or cremated, there will be some expenses. And so we can pay for that ahead of time. We can do some pre-need burial planning or cremation planning or funeral planning or whatever you want to call it. We can pay for that ahead of time for me and my spouse. In some cases, what if my spouse has been driving a 15, 20-year-old car and he or she's been wanting a car for a while? Well, maybe this is probably the right time to buy a new car. I'm not suggesting that they go buy a $100,000 Mercedes. Okay, that's not a great way to protect money, because after that Mercedes gets driven off the lot, it's already gone down in value by $20,000. But if they just need a new car, great, then this would be the time to buy a new car. Maybe there's some work that has to be done in the house, right? They've been wanting to fix the roof for a while, or they need to fix the tile work in their kitchen and they've been putting it off. Medicaid is totally fine with the spouse at home. I mean, both spouses doing repairs on the house prior to a Medicaid application. They're not giving money away. This money is being used for them. So doing any kind of house repairs and getting that done would make sense to pay for prior to applying for Medicaid if we have too much money. And then one of the last things, which I always throw out there to clients, and it's more common than not that the clients we tend to run into that are applying for Medicaid, that their house is paid off, but there's plenty there's not a number that we work with where the house is not paid off. There's still a mortgage. Well, an easy way, I've got a client right now that I'm working with, perfect example. There's about $120,000 left on the mortgage to him and his wife's home. His wife's in a nursing home, and they've got about 100, the amount that they have that's too much from a Medicaid standpoint is a little less actually than what they still owe on the mortgage. And so our suggestion, and while we're getting things ready and we're getting ready to apply for Medicaid, is that once enough of them, they have access to this money because they've got to cash some of it out, unfortunately, from some annuities and IRAs. And so there will be a tax hit, which they can't avoid anyway, because those accounts are in the name of the spouse that's in the nursing home, and she's limited to $2,000. But we can cash out some of these products and use that money to pay down the mortgage, right? I mean, this is them still keeping that money. They're not really giving any of it up. It's going directly into an asset that they get to keep, that they don't have to sell. So we're not going to cover every single strategy today, guys, but these are just some things to consider. It's important to understand that, just because we have a loved one that's not doing well and we might need to go into a nursing home and we're concerned that, our mom or dad who's still living at home and is still healthy and doing well, there's obviously a concern in these situations that, obviously we want to make sure that, let's say it's dad that's going to the nursing home is taken care of and that we get a Medicaid for him. We obviously can't lose track of mom's well-being, right? And what if mom's 10, 15 years younger? My mom is 17 years younger than my dad. So if we were in a situation like this, we have to be conscious of my mom's financial situation, because it's not even like she's 89 like my dad is and might only have a number of years left, right? She's in her early 70s and very healthy. So if something happened to my dad and he had to go into a nursing home, we'd be very concerned about my mom and wanting to make sure that she's going to be, okay financially for the next, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, whatever that looks like for her. And I say this because oftentimes families lose track of that the healthier spouse, and even the healthier spouse kind of loses track of his or her own well-being, because they're so focused on taking care of their husband or wife who's not doing well. We see this all the time. They start to neglect their own care and their own needs, and in a lot of cases they start to fail from a healthcare standpoint, because they're overexerting themselves and they're doing things for their spouse on a pretty regular basis that they really shouldn't be doing, right? They probably should have a caregiver in place, etc. So these are just, again, things to consider. One thing to understand is how Medicare sort of comes into play with all of this. A lot of times people get confused about what Medicare covers in a long-term care situation and what they don't. So really Medicare is health insurance, right? I mean, I think most of you know that. And so Medicare is going to come in and help pay for, doctor's visits and surgeries and things that we're having, operations or whatever we're having done in a hospital, et cetera. Medicare and any Medicare supplement we have is going to come in and help cover those medical needs of ours. But as far as our chronic needs in a nursing home, Medicare doesn't cover nursing home stays other than rehab. Okay, so Medicare will cover some aspects of rehab. So if I go to the hospital and I'm in the hospital for at least 3 overnights, and those 3 overnights are considered inpatient status. Okay, now I could be in the hospital for 7 nights, but at least as long as at least 3 of those nights are inpatient status. And then I get discharged from the hospital to a skilled nursing facility for rehab, which is pretty common. A lot of rehab is done in skilled nursing facilities. Then Medicare will cover the first 20 days 100%. After that, for the remaining 80 days, or for up to the remaining 80 days, so for a total of 100, for those remaining 80 days, Medicare, if I have a Medicare supplement, well, I shouldn't say that. Medicare in general will cover 80% of the stay, and then if I have a Medicare supplement, the Medicare supplement will pick up the additional 20%. So I'm potentially not out of pocket at all for up to 100 days. If I have a Medicare Advantage plan, those work a little bit differently, and a lot of those plans are different, so I can't speak to those. Typically, there is some out of pocket that's involved with a Medicare Advantage plan for those 80 days. For everybody, the first 20 days is covered 100%, but for those 80 remaining days, if it's a Medicare Advantage plan or any kind of non-traditional Medicare supplement, there probably will be some out-of-pocket costs borne by the patient. And so if that's a plan that you have, or your mom or dad or brother or sister, or whoever you're maybe focused on and tuning in today, it's probably a good idea to see how that plan works and to get an understanding of how that plan helps in a rehab situation. Okay. On this topic, just so we're all on the same page, Medicare is not, let me rephrase that. You are not guaranteed 100 days to be covered by Medicare. Medicare will help cover somebody as long as they're making improvement. Okay, because the whole point of Medicare covering somebody is for rehab. Now, if on day 33, the nursing home, the folks at the nursing home where I'm getting rehab, have a meeting and they determine, hey, Matt's not making any progress. and they use a term, Matt has plateaued. They can stop. They'll typically, what they'll do is they'll reach out to the family and say, listen, we're going to give you, in 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 days, Medicare's done, and Matt can stay here, but he'll stay here as a long-term care patient, and it's $320 a day. The average stay in a nursing home now, I'd say in sort of North Shore area, where I'm just presuming most of you are living, you're probably looking at the average being somewhere between $275 and $325 a day for a skilled nursing facility. So again, have a good understanding as to how your Medicare supplement or Medicare Advantage plan works, just so you're prepared for that situation if and when it ever arises. Right, better to know what you're looking at than be in a situation that you weren't expecting to have any out of pocket for, or whatever the situation might be. Another good thing is that if you've got a loved one in the hospital, you really should be asking, the social workers or the staff, how is my loved one classified? Are they inpatient status? Are they under observation? If they're only under observation, you might be able to petition them to say, what, this seems like a situation where they should really be inpatient. And there's actually professionals. There's professionals out there that can help with these things. They can help sort of advocate for you in a hospital setting, and they can look at the medical records and help kind of petition to the hospital, say, listen, you've got this person marked as under observation, but this should really be inpatient. And I've had clients where all of a sudden they get a bill from the nursing home for that first month of rehab after leaving the hospital, and the bill is $20,000. Because while if I'm in a nursing home long-term, as a long-term care resident, it might be an average of $300 a day. If I'm there for rehab, I'm getting so many more services on a daily basis if I'm there for rehab than if I'm just there as a long-term resident. And the daily rate could be $500 up to $700 a day for rehab. So they could easily be looking at a bill for $20,000 for that month. We've had clients reach out to us saying, why do we get this bill? This must have been a mistake. What's going on? And typically in those cases, we find out that their loved one was classified as under observation. And that's why Medicare didn't cover the first 20 days. So again, you've got to be informed. You've got to really be an advocate for your loved one when they're in the hospital for an extended period of time, or even for a short, again, even for 3 nights, right? Really want to be on top of this. So important. The last thing I want to touch on, and then I'll have a couple minutes for some questions, is private caregivers. Okay, I'll tell you, these become an issue, guys. Here's what I mean, right? So when we talked about applying for Medicaid earlier, I mentioned that Medicaid has this 5-year look back, and they want to see what we did with our money over the last 5 years. Well, we've worked with plenty of clients over the years where, over the last 5 years, or maybe more than 5 years, they had a caregiver at home. They were, they didn't want to go. Most of us, if presented the option of living at home with some help versus living in a nursing home, most of us would opt to live in our own home with some help. Not everybody. Some people, are happy to move into a nursing home. Maybe they just want to be around more people. They don't want somebody in their home, et cetera, et cetera. But for those that have caregivers at home, typically people go in one of 2 directions when they are hiring a caregiver. Well, 3. They might have their adult son or daughter. They might hire an agency, right? And there are plenty of caregiving companies out there nowadays. Oh my gosh, I can't even keep track. And then the third option is that private caregiver that, maybe they found through a friend or a friend of a friend, and this person took care of my mom or my dad or my grandpa or my friend's grandpa, and they're available now, and they'd be a great fit to help you or with your parents. Let's talk about how all these work in the context of Medicaid. Okay. So when we look at the caregiving companies, this is the easiest one. Okay, there's really not going to be any issues for Medicaid, because when you're hiring a caregiving company, you're signing a contract. Okay, so we have a written agreement that says that they're going to provide caregivers, and you're going to pay them $31 an hour for those caregivers. and it started on this date and it's open-ended until you stop using their caregivers. Great. That's easy because we apply for Medicaid. When we apply for Medicaid, we're going to give, as part of what we hand over to the state, we're going to give them a copy of that contract, because inevitably when they look through our bank statements, they're going to see that we wrote checks every month to, senior helpers for $3,500. And they want to make sure that Senior Helpers is a caregiving company, right? And it's not just some shell organization of my brother, or that, as a way for us to filter money out of mom and dad's bank account. So that typically becomes a non-issue. The issues are when we work with clients, or when we have somebody that's applying for Medicaid and money has been paid to adult children who've been providing care, or grandchildren, could be grandchildren too. Or they're paying this private caregiver who's not a relative, not related at all, right? Just that friend of a friend who blah, blah, blah. These are the issues that we see, because what happens is then we go to apply for Medicaid, and Medicaid says, Matt, we see that you're writing checks totaling, maybe on average $4,000 a month to Joe Howard. Who's Joe Howard? Well, Joe Howard's the caregiver that's been taking care of me for the last 4 years. Okay, cool. Where's the contract between you and Joe showing that Joe is going to provide care, and that outlines when the care started and how much you're paying him and how many days a week he's working, etc. Oh, I don't have a contract. Same, and then kind of replace Joe with my son or daughter or my grandchild if they were taking care of me and I was paying them. The problem here is that Medicaid is going to default to the idea that this was not a caregiver, and this was just somebody that I was gifting money to. And this is going to be an especially high hurdle to climb if I was giving money to my son or daughter or some relative. So their stance will be that I was gifting the money. And so what do we have to do in these situations? Well, it's not ideal. We have to get affidavits signed by, my client that's moving into the nursing home, or if he or she is incapacitated, then their power of attorney is signing the affidavit. We're getting the caregivers to sign affidavits, and we're having everybody sign affidavits saying, yes, there was no contract. However, Joe Howard has been, started to work for us providing care in 2018. He's been working 5 days a week, approximately 6 hours a day, being paid $20 an hour. And we hope, we cross our fingers, that the state is willing to accept it. Some cases they will, and in some cases they won't. And we've talked to colleagues. We've been lucky enough to, just knock on wood here, that I'm going to say that we've just been lucky enough that the state has accepted our affidavits, and we've gotten this by for most of our clients. But it's not ideal. It creates more work, which creates more fees for our clients. And frankly, it's never a guarantee. I tell clients all the time when we go down this path that this is what we have to do, but we have to be prepared. The state can come back and say, listen, this is great, but we're not buying it. Even though they're signing affidavits, there should have been a contract in place. And we're sort of at the mercy of the state. And so my 2 cents in these cases to all of you, and for your friends and your family members, and for anybody that that might have a private caregiver in the home, please put a contract in place. Even though you've got, Joe Howard, the private caregiver, or even though your son or your daughter or your grandchild or your niece or your nephew is your caregiver, if you're paying them, you need to have a written contract. You need to. Unless you're worth $100 million and you're never going to apply for Medicaid. And even in that case, you probably should have a contract, just if nothing else, for liability reasons. But, it's good practice, and it won't hurt. And it can only help. It will definitely make life a lot easier in a situation where Medicaid has to be applied for. I'll tell you, having that written contract, it has taken a lot of stress off families. In the cases where they had one, or sometimes it's situations where we meet with somebody and they've already had that private caregiver in place for 6 months, and Medicaid might not be on the horizon for another year or two, but we know it's coming. And so I say it's not too late. Just because you didn't get a contract in place in the beginning, we can't go make a retroactive contract. So we can't have you sign a contract that refers to care being provided 3 years ago or a year ago when the care started. But I typically tell clients, listen, we put a contract in place now that's prospective moving forward. And if we have to apply for Medicaid in a year or two, I would hope, our goal is that the state will look at that and say, oh, okay, they didn't have a contract in place. Even though we expect everybody to know how Medicaid works, we understand that they probably didn't realize the rules. They talked to an attorney, the attorney mentioned this, and hopefully we can get past it that way. So again, just a couple things to consider, and these are things that we've seen as that have been pretty big issues for families over the years. But with that said, guys, that's really all I have planned to talk about today. There's one more question in the chat box, which I'll address. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to entertain them. I'm good here until quarter after. So the question here is, how much is the spouse allowed to have in the bank? So we mentioned that earlier, but I will put it in the chat box for everyone to see, just so you can see this. So the spouse is allowed to have $109,560, a house, and then the person moving into the nursing home is allowed to have no more than $2,000 in his or her name. That's it, guys. Thank you for your attention.
Any other questions for Matt? Matt will be talking on Wednesday, June 1st, elder law Q&A. So he'll be taking questions about estate planning and elder law, continuing the Medicaid talk in July at his July 6th talk. So lots ahead of us with Matt. Our next talk is next Thursday, May 12th, long-term care planning. So kind of talking a little bit about what Matt's talking about today. I do encourage you to sign up for our lunch and learn, especially if you want to be in person and eat some lunch with other humans. It's on Wednesday, May 18th, so you can check that out. And other than that, I think we're good. Thank you again.
And really quick, I just, sorry, somebody had asked for my contact info. I just put it in the chat box, guys.
Okay.
So if you want to grab it before Pam closes up shop, it's in there.
Yeah, definitely grab his information. And then you can also email me if you missed it by chance. Thank you. So that concludes our YMCA Education Series presentation. On behalf of the North Suburban YMCA and our YES, we thank you for supporting organizations and programs like this. Thank you to Matt, of course, for speaking with us. And programs like this are free and open for everyone in the community. So we encourage you to support programs like this. You can find more information on our website, www.nsymca.org. And we look forward to seeing you at least next month, if not sooner. So bye, everyone, and have a great day. Thanks again, Matt.
Bye, guys. Thanks, Pam. Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Bye.